This week, Snuffed Out and Fraternity fight for the hell of it in Vale of the Silent. CVA and United Fleet are involved in a capital escalation in Syndicate. Fountain goes quiet. Dock workers get paid a visit by Nullsechnaya Sholupen. A bunch of 80 prize ships are destroyed and I highlight one of their hunters. Literally Triggered and Dragon Dynasty clash in Tenerifis and pull others into the fight. A couple of supercarriers get stolen. PAPI Alliances make their big announcement and the Big Heist comes to TQ. Oh yes, and CCP brings more news with their July status update. Hello pod people, I am Frost and this is your weekly EVE Online update. Welcome back. So as you saw from the headlines, there was a lot of stuff going on this week and I would like to thank all of you who supported the release being on a Tuesday rather than a Monday. I would never have been able to get all of this researched and edited in time for a Monday release. So it all worked out for the better. Now, as always, we start off with our prize winners of the Scope syndication skins. And first up, I have Bjorn Chura, who was from the 5th of July episode and came in a little bit late. So there we go, we got Bjorn. I've only got one winner come forward this week, and that is Trevelyan Hayes. And I'm still waiting on Jorge Flores, that is your YouTube name. You need to get in touch with me and get your Raven Scope syndication skin. And as always, I have 2 more to give away, and that'll be a little bit later on in the show. Oh, and by the way, my favorite comment for last week was definitely from Sebestior, who gave me a mashup of lyrics that included either Monday or Tuesday, and it was like Boomtown Rats. There's about 4 or 5 of them now. Mamas and Papas, I can't even remember now. It was right at the beginning of the week that I saw it. But yeah, that was a great comment, so thank you for that. All right, so let's dive into EVE and the conflicts of EVE. So I'm not even going to show you the universe this week because I'm literally all over the place. What we're going to do instead is we're literally going to jump up to my box and we're going to go straight into Vale of the Silent. So in Vale of the Silent, a fight took place and I have the battle report right here. And this fight literally took in P3EN-E, which is just on the border with OB, so it's just on the border with Losec. What is interesting here is that this fight literally started off for the hell of it. So Snuff got bored and they took 40 zealots into P3EN-E and started reinforcing some Ansiblex jump gates. And eventually Fraternity brought out some Munins, but Snuffed Out were having problems with getting the Munins to engage. So they dropped a whole bunch of Horde Reds and that created an escalation. And as you can see, the results of this is that Snuffed Out and Co. Lost 174 billion, Fraternity lost 136 billion, so that's like 300 billion lost on a fight that was just for the hell of it. So good to see things being undocked, and especially big ships, especially with the price of dreads at the moment and everything. It's good to see these capital fights actually still happening. And I'll have more news on the scarcity, and that'll be towards the end of the show. So anyway, that was a good fight there, clearly. Then we're going to move on to Syndicate. So in Syndicate, CVA, that's Curatorus Veritatis Alliance, I can't even never pronounce it, CVA, have been fighting United Fleet now since probably the end of May, and I've not really covered it, and I really should have, but I've kind of been expanding my horizons. And originally United Fleet were fighting CVA with Shadow Cartel. Shadow Cartel went off to do other things. Nullsechnaya Sholupen came in and are now fighting with United Fleet. And so all of this happened over a couple of timers, hull timers for an Astra House and a Raitaru. And what was interesting about this fight, as you can see, let me see if my pen is working today. We had 78 billion is lost to CVA and Co. and 23 billion lost to United Fleet. Now the reason why this loss is much higher on the CVA side is because CVA made a mistake, or they kind of got a little bit too cocky. These are their own words. Actually, Gian, who's one of the FCs, actually posted a very kind of truthful AAR, after action report on Reddit. Yes, there is some stuff on Reddit that is absolutely true, or close to true anyway. And I did do my background checks as well to make sure this all planned out. But anyway, what happened was we had, excuse me, so we had Tempest from CVA. Also within CVA we have Vega. So Vega have actually been fighting United Fleet for a long time, even before CVA were involved. Vega are mostly an industrial alliance, and they now actually share fleets with CVA, and they sorted out their comms so they can fly as one group. And so they came along with their Tempest, which is kind of your standard issue stuff to sit tethered on a structure and then engage when you feel it's ready. United Fleet brought a whole bunch of Typhoons, and what happened was that CVA dropped a bunch of Horde Dreads. Now, they've done this previously, as I understand, but what happened this time, which is what they were not expecting, was that United Fleet escalated for the first time and dropped Cap Dreads. And unfortunately, CVA were in a position where they'd committed too many Hordes, so therefore they weren't able to put enough Cap Dreads to be able to fight off the Cap Dreads that had been dropped by United Fleet and Nullsechnaya Sholupen. And as a consequence, they lost all of their, pretty much, I think it was all of them, yes, all of their capitals there. So that's the Dreads and also the Apostles that were providing the reps for the Tempests. So a bit of a bloody fight there, and I just wanted to bring it up and mention it. And hopefully from now on, I'll be getting more info on these fights and keep you up to speed on what's happening in Syndicate. All right, so then I need to mention very quickly Cloud Ring. So in Cloud Ring, what I wanted to talk about was Out of the Blue. So I mentioned Out of the Blue how they were made up of primarily ex-Hysteria alliances, and also there was the Volta Corp, or pre-Volta Corp that was in there as well. And then I mentioned Brand New Bros. That is the alliance name, and it actually consists of a New Bro alliance. Now, I was actually corrected and it was brought up to speed on that. I thought they were fairly new, but they're not actually new. They were originally the New Bro Corp of Test, and they've been around for quite a while. And so therefore they moved out of Test and went into Out of the Blue. So there you go. So that's what's going on with Brand New Bros. Also, grab my pen. If you remember, there was an Astra house that belonged to Forsaken Empire in BTAC-D. BTAC-D was also reinforced. The iHub was reinforced, and Tri have now taken that back. The Astra house has now been destroyed, and that brings us smoothly onto Fountain. So if I jump into Fountain, essentially, after all the big fight that we had last week with all the different entities involved, it was almost close to 40 alliances involved. And I said the timer was back in Hull again. Well, this time things turned out a lot differently. So the main thing was that Forsaken Empire was unable to bring enough allies to the fight, and they were outnumbered. So rather than just die needlessly, they left it uncontested, and the Fortizar that belonged to Forsaken Empire was destroyed. On top of that, Vapor, that is the ticker for Out of the Blue, have also managed to secure the iHub in Fountain in J5A-IX. So they now have a beachhead. Now, I haven't seen any activity this week. Nothing's been reported to me, but one can assume that this is not over, and that potentially Out of the Blue and Forsaken Empire are going to be clashing. But this time, Forsaken Empire are going to be very much on the defensive, having lost their capital system and lost their staging fortizar. So once again, we'll have to keep an eye out on that and see what happens. Okay, then we have covered, the other thing as well I need to mention with J5A is that obviously Out of the Blue have not only just taken the iHub, they've also anchored an Astra house, and now they have a Fortizar there as well. So they actually have a proper beachhead system with a Fortizar in it that they can stage from. All right, so then we're going to go off and do some random stuff. So first up in Genesis. Now, I don't normally cover high sec, but I wanted to cover this one kill. It was a golem. It died in high sec, so this is a marauder. But the thing I wanted to point out is that high sec is not safe, and this kill mail was for 14 billion ISK, and it all comes down to literally one mod carrying most of the weight on this, and that was where is it? Oh, it's right down the bottom. Let me slide a little bit further down. I can't. Okay, it's right here. So we had an officer mod worth 10 billion, a modified damage control, and it got ganked. So be aware that don't bling out your ships, or if you do bling out your ships, be prepared to lose them, as anything can get ganked in high sec. So there we go. So that's the golem with a 14 billion ISK kill mail. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go over to Sync Liaison. I always want to say liaison. It's Sync Liaison. So Sync Liaison, which is right here, and then we have the Bleak Lands, and these two are related. And the reason why they're related is if we go into the Bleak Lands first, dock workers have kind of deployed over this way, They've actually said they've actually pulled out a fountain now that Out of the Blue are actually established in Fountain. They've actually pulled out of there and are going off to do other things. And they're actually in Haras, which is right here. Now, Nullsechnaya Sholupen have come along and they have reinforced, let me see if I can find it, a Fortizar, an Astra House, and 3 Athenors, all belonging to dock workers, were reinforced by Nullsechnaya Sholupen. Yeah. So I got confused there between my low sex and high sex. Right, null sex and low sex. Now, the reason why is because it is my understanding, this actually happened last night, so I haven't been able to double check for myself, but I have it on good authority that in Sync Liaison, which is right here, right down the bottom here in Shurasana, is that right? Shurasana. In Shurasana, Nullsechnaya Sholupen have actually got a staging system now. They have dropped a Fortizar. And the reason why this system is quite important is because it is a good connection midpoint from the north, which is where Nullsechnaya Sholupen are based. I think they're in Tribute, if I remember rightly from last week from what I said. And so they've deployed down south, and it looks like NSH and dock workers are going to be going and having some conflicts. So hopefully someone from Nullsechnaya Sholupen will get in touch with me. I do have a contact, but it's not a very good one, so I would like to hear both sides of that conflict. So do please get in touch and keep me up to date on what's going on, and I will pass it on and keep everyone up to date. All right, so then we're going to go over to back into a high sec, and we're going to focus on the Citadel as one spot, and once again Sync Liaison. There we go. So two things to cover there. Now, what we're going to cover is actually 80 prize ships. It's been rather unusual that in the space of about 7 or 8 days, 3 80 prize ships were destroyed. One was destroyed just before last week's show, and I have them here. So we have a Tiamat, which was from AT16 that was destroyed in Cubanon in the Citadel. We then had a Victor, which was AT15, destroyed in Sync Liaison. And then a few days later in Tama, we had a Silver Magnate, which was the Liberation, the Amar Liberation Games. Is it Amar Succession Trials? That's it, Amar Succession Trials, which took place in 2015. So these Silver Magnates originally were in the first Amar trials. 19 were released for that, and then another 20 were released in 2015. I think now there are 31 left after this one death. But the thing I wanted to bring up with these was the circumstance when they died. I haven't spoken to the pilot of the Silver Magnate, but I spoke to the pilot of the Tiamat, Judas 2, and to Cuck Mobile of No Handlebars. And both of them were really, really friendly. They were really helpful in terms of what happened. So a little bit of background here. So the Tiamat essentially got caught by a Gnosis. It actually killed a Gnosis in Cubanon earlier that day. Literally just dropped on it on its own. And that Gnosis then reappeared about 6 hours later. And so Judas 2 dropped on it again. And this time he got caught. And there's a name that I want to point out to you on this kill board, which is right here, which is Frederick von Hull. You'll also see some other names come up, like Thuvia, Flight Leader, Grease Pen, amongst others. And these guys form a pack that specialize in hunting 80 ships. So we'll come back to that, to Frederick, in a minute. So then the Victor, who's right here, really interesting situation here. So once again, oh, by the way, with the Tiamat, it was very much a case of, I've got it, so why not use it? So yeah, credits to that for undocking it and making use of it on a regular basis. Now with the Victor, Cuck Mobile decided he was bored and thought he would put his Victor to good use to try and bait out Frederick von Hull. But unfortunately, things went a little bit sideways. And this is where random events can really affect you in Eve. So he was all set, he had a backup team all ready, and he was going to use the Victor to bait out Frederick. But he was still in the same system as his backup. And he was about to jump through the gate, and he was basically faffing about on the gate, as I understand. And this random Hecate came in and managed to tackle him. And this wasn't expected. and he didn't have enough DPS to be able to clear off the Hecate, and he still had to get everybody to get to him because they couldn't Sino in because they were actually in the same system. By this time, Frederick von Hole and his crew were able to become aware of the situation and able to jump through the gate and kill the victor. So it was literally, and I spoke to Frederick, and Frederick literally said, you know, if this hadn't gone down this way and he had actually managed to jump into another system, then they would have got destroyed. The fight would have gone completely the other way. So really, really random situation on how that died. So let's talk briefly about Frederick von Hole. So for those of you who are not familiar, this is Frederick right here. If you have an AT prize ship, then Frederick looks more like this. So Frederick has become the AT ship hunter and has got the reputation for it. Now, I got the opportunity to speak to Frederick or chat to him on Discord. He was really, really nice and really helpful. And gave me a little bit of background. So originally, Frederick was hunting ratting battleships and also blocks groups. And he said that, you know, there used to be like 3 to 5 groups a day back in the day. This was a few years ago. And also Plex runners. And obviously the meta changed. Injectors moved, these are his exact words, injectors moved ratters into carriers. Before people used to rat into battleships, now they can skill inject into carriers, make more race that way, and those make harder targets. And then Citadels and the Plex Vault killed off Plex runners. So for those of you that are unaware, that are quite new to the game, before you had the Plex Vault, you actually physically had to move Plex around. And before Citadels, there was only so many places you could dock, and so therefore you were able to put up bubble traps and use long points and stuff like that to be able to catch these Plex runners. And that kind of got killed off by the change in the meta. So there were less blobs targets. It was also then harder to replace Sinos. And then also there's higher chance of capital support. So the harder to replace Sinos is obviously quite recent with, I forgot, it was Hunter's Boon, I think that was brought in. Or was it the one before? I can't remember. But either way, it was just literally about a month ago that we, yeah, either way, you know what I mean. But what I wanted to come across was that what happened was in September 2018, Frederick came across a victor. And so he went to iBeast and spoke to iBeast about possible fits. If you're not familiar with iBeast, he is a Russian-speaking content creator, loads of followers, does loads of really good content. Look him up. Even if you don't speak Russian, his videos are great, and there's always lots of action in those. So anyway, he spoke to iBeast on possible fits, and this ended up being the first AT ship kill for Frederick. Then as a consequence of that, he got in touch, or he formed a group of AT ship hunters. And first it was mostly Russian speakers, and then eventually that grew to then also include English speakers. And now they number just over a dozen, and I highlighted a few of them for you just a minute ago. Being Greasepain, Thuvia, I think Proquito, as well as Frederick. And so now they basically try and focus on hunting these AT ships, and they've been rather successful and have had quite a few kills, over the last couple of years. Now, be aware that even though I've said that Frederick is a Russian speaker, do not assume that you can time zone tank. He actually told me he will quite happily alarm clock at 4 a.m. for a kill. So there is no hiding from Frederick. And even though we touched on his hunting techniques by accident more than anything else, I'm not going to tell you about them because I think I should rather keep the mystique and leave it at that. So thank you very much to Frederick von Hole for the interview. I also need to make a shout out to Yonis Pserad. So Yonis enjoys the show and actually convinced Frederick von Hole to come and have a chat with me. He doesn't normally do interviews, and so Yonis is to thank for his help in achieving that. So, and also thank you to my AT pilots for talking to me and being really cool about it. Okay, so time for a giveaway. It's the Rovingscape syndication skin. I have a keyword for you this week. The keyword, if you remember, if you haven't seen the show before, you have to put a comment below in YouTube, and you have to include the word that is the keyword. So the keyword this week is hunt. You can also use all variants of that, so hunted, hunting, hunter, etc. So take your pick, make up a sentence with the word hunt in it, or any variants of hunt, and you have until Friday the 30th of July at 1800 UTC. That is the cutoff. So, and also I have to mention as well, I have a new button down below called Super Chat, and you can actually support the channel by clicking on that button. You can actually donate now directly through YouTube to the channel and help the channel grow and help us to get to Vegas. Because just to remind you, Frosty's OP, that's Null and myself, will be going to eVegas on the 22nd to the 24th of October and doing coverage and hopefully interviews and all that kind of good stuff. All right, so there we go. That's the giveaway done. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to jump over to the south and cover all the south because there's lots to cover. So I'm just going to cut right here and grab a drink. So I'm losing my voice. This is a long episode. I'll be right back. Right, I'm up in my box. We have New Eden Universe in front of us, and we're going to cover the south now. So first thing in the south, we've got Curse. Obviously, I mentioned this a few weeks ago. The initiative I deployed over in GTAC0Q86 and had a whole bunch of structures anchored there. So they had an Astra House, and I think it was about 5 or 6 Raitarus. Fire Coalition and NC. Have been systematically destroying these, whilst the initiative have actually been quite busy in Delve. In the last week, they were involved in the reinforcement of the shield timers that were kicked off last week. And so Fire Coalition and NC. Took advantage of that. And they've actually come back and blobbed them and removed the timers. I don't even know if they were contested. I didn't hear anything from the initiative or from Fire Coalition about it. And all that's left now is 1 Astra House and 1 Raitaru, which is in its hull timer. Obviously, this is NPC nullsec, so it doesn't mean the initiative are getting kicked out because they still have a station that they can base out of. But I think they were using the Raitarus for probably for some industry, some stuff like that. All right, so then we're going to go on to Tenerifis. So with Tenerifis, we're going to be talking about Dragon Dynasty and literally triggered. So Dragon Dynasty are down here. They've got this whole area here, except obviously this one system that belongs to Eltrig. So literally triggered were here quite a while ago. But before I come on to literally triggered, I need to say as well, I said last week that I thought the Dragon Dynasty were a part of XX Death. That's the Renter Alliance of Fire Coalition. That is not the case. I was mistaken. There is no formal relationship with Dragon Dynasty, but the view of Fire Coalition is they're happy for Dragon Dynasty to be down there, and Dragon Dynasty said they were happy to do their own thing. Now, obviously, that doesn't mean there's not necessarily any interaction, as we'll see in a while. But first, let's talk about Literally Triggered. If you remember that Literally Triggered moved down here a month ago, 2 months ago, and it wasn't really clear as to what they were up to. They literally just took this one system. Well, now it has become a little bit clearer. And if I can bring it up here, you can see that what we have here is we have an Athanor, and the Athanor was actually in, let me just clear that, in Omist. So what was happening is that Literally Triggered were dropping a whole bunch of Athanors all around Army of Mango space and ripping their moons, essentially, and also using the system in Tenerifis as a PvP staging to be able to go after Army of Mango. Excuse me. So, Literally Triggered have actually been involved in other stuff as well. If I go back to my map, they've now actually been attacking Dragon Dynasty. And this has actually created an interesting situation for Fire Coalition, because Fire Coalition are actually kind of friendly to Literally Triggered, who are part of Winter Coalition, by the way, and to Dragon Dynasty. And so now they had 2 entities that they were friendly to fighting each other. So a fight broke out, and it was over an Astra House, I think. It was a Raitaru, so over a Raitaru timer. And you're going to see how this is going to get very confusing. Once again, this is one of these kill mails that involves so many different people. So what we have is we had Literally Triggered over here, who were attacking the Dragon Dynasty. Now, the Dragon Dynasty have actually been getting close to Vindictive. If I remember rightly, Vindictive are actually in Legacy Coalition. And Vindictive and Dragon Dynasty were flying together to protect their Raitaru. And they brought a Hurricane Fleet, or Hurricane Fleet issues. Then, as the timer was about to take place, my understanding is Literally Triggered dropped a Naglafar, a Dreadnought. Then, out of the blue, not out of the blue, the Alliance, but out of the blue, sort of unexpectedly, Deep Water Hooligans and Straya Post showed up for some content, and of sound mind, of course. And they dropped a Balgorn fleet along with, a Balgorn, I'm trying to remember what else they brought. What did they bring? What goes with the Balgon? Typhoons. There we go. They brought Typhoons and Guardians. So they just hot dropped in to third party on the fight. And so then what happened from there is, let me see if I can just get this all in the right order. So literally triggered, then so they dropped a Dread, they then brought a Tengu fleet. So then Deepwater Hooligan, Sail Mine, Strayer Post then dropped in with their Balgorn, with Timoxa as FC, and the Typhoons and the Guardians. And then Dragon Dynasty arrived with their Hurricane fleet issues. And then the fight was breaking out between these groups. And then Fire Coalition arrived in Mulins. And Fire Coalition sided with the Dragon Dynasty rather than with literally triggered, on the basis that they were friendly to both parties, but they would defend they would help the defender. So we ended up with Legion of Death and Unreal Alliance, Razor Alliance, Valkyrie, so Fire Coalition, essentially siding with Dragon Dynasty against Siege, literally triggered. And then Siege Green arrived, and Siege Green arrived in a Loki fleet. So this Loki fleet was looking a bit of a handful, and so Legion of Death or Fire Coalition then anchored or tethered on the Astra House, on the Raitaru. Right, so at that point then the Raitaru timer was saved, and at that point literally triggered warped off, and Siege Green followed them with their Lokis. And here Fire made a mistake. What Fire were not aware of was Siege Green were not there as a third party. They came to help literally triggered. And so they jumped through, they got caught on the gate, and then after that they jumped back in, they got bubbled, and then they lost a whole chunk of their fleet, which is why the majority of the losses ended up with Fire Coalition. So big mistake there from Fire Coalition. They weren't aware that literally triggered and Siege Green were actually in cahoots together, and this was an organized group and an organized attack jointly against Dragon Dynasty and Vindictive. So there you go. I hope that kind of made sense. I was a little bit all over the place with that, but the main thing is what we saw again was third parties getting involved. Obviously Siege Green, you never know kind of where they stand or who they're with. They do seem to favour Winter Coalition quite a lot. There seems to be a bit of a relationship there. I don't know whether that's a paid relationship or not, but there does seem to be a relationship. So something to be aware of. All right, so there we go. That's Tenerifis. I'm going to jump away from Tenerifis now before I confuse myself even more. And we're going to go over to Amentia quickly. Now, Amentia, I wanted to bring this up because there was an extra large ship maintenance array. Now, this is actually a quick little interesting story again, so it's proper story time today. So this extra large ship maintenance array was floating around in a POS, and the POS was unfueled. And these two pilots, that's Charles Sund and Alfo Suromo, came along and realized that it was basically unprotected. And these guys are a wormhole group. They're in a small wormhole. So they went and tried to find the highest DPS ships they had, and all on their lonesome, they started bashing this extra large ship maintenance array, and it exploded. But what it didn't drop, was an Erebus. There was a Titan in there, but it did not drop. The loot ferry said no. But then there's an irony to this story as well, is that if in the event that it had dropped, neither of those two pilots could fly an Erebus, and they would have ended up with a situation with an Erebus without a pilot, floating in space, with two pilots that can't fly it, and that would have created a very interesting situation. So it was a shame it didn't drop. That would have just extended the story further, but I just thought that was interesting and I wanted to bring it to your attention. Also, I'm going to come back to Tenerifis. I knew there was one more thing. I need to also cover a video that's right here. Deepwater Hooligan actually stole a hell from Dragon Dynasty by using a spy. They dropped someone in the corp, and they actually found out that the bookmark and the password details, etc., the entry into the POS was all through the corp, and they were able to jump into this hell and steal it. So that was one of two hells that have been stolen in the last 10 days or so. There was another one that was stolen, and I'm going to come on to that in a minute, because I didn't have proof of it before, and I do now. If you want this video, it'll be linked in the description below. But before we go to that, let me just come on to a couple of systems. So let me get my mouse back. Things I need to cover. I need to cover Catch quickly, just to say that Wamp are have now pretty much secured their whole constellation. As expected, they did not take this system, as it looks like that's a jump bridge somewhere into the rest of Dreadbomb territory. And I just wanted to bring your attention that I actually had an interview with Wamp, that's Weapons of Mass Production. I spoke to Thanak, their alliance leader, who actually started this all up as a YouTube project. And he is part of my Alliance Spotlight for this Thursday. So if you want to check that out, that's coming this Thursday. All right, then we're going to go on to Fetherbolis. And in Fetherbolis, I just wanted to highlight that Red Menace Coalition are kind of poking back into Fetherbolis. So first of all, we have Warriors of the Blood Gods, which I haven't really talked about before. I think I mentioned one of their Titans that ended up logging in after a 16-month break and got caught by the changes to the cloaks and ended up losing the Titan. So they are actually part of Red Menace Coalition now, and they've started taking systems in Fetherbolis. And as you can see, Red have then taken these two systems. I think they've been flipping backwards and forwards. I can't remember who else took them, but I know someone took them a few weeks ago. So we're going to have to keep an eye on that and see if Red Menace Coalition start making more inroads into Fetherbolis. Then we're going to go on to Paragon Soul. So this is the other hell that was stolen. This one was stolen actually just before my last week's show. I knew about it, but I didn't have any proof. The video came out a little bit later. And this is basically Goon Swarm. They found this pause, they reinforced it, and then they realized that on the reinforcement timer came out, that the hell was still in there. So they formed a fleet, they brought it in, and they stole the hell. And you can actually see in this as well that the FC actually fleet warped his fleet off as the pause died. I don't know whether that's because he thought his pilots were going to shoot it or his pilots were going to steal it. And then he flew back on his own just to make sure that he could jump in the hell and steal it. So there you go. So those two hells that were acquired through nefarious ways. There we go. All right. So once again, that's linked in the description. Now we can come on to Delve. All right. So this is where we come on to, first of all, the PAPI announcement. So it was announced that there was going to be an announcement on the Saturday, the 24th. And this announcement essentially comes down to this, that PAPI is going to finish this one way or another in the next 4 weeks. And they are committing to doing as much as they can. Now, this was announced in different ways with different alliances. Some announced it via email, some did a stream for 40 minutes, some did just a Discord post. But basically, all of the alliances are on the same wavelength within PAPI, that they're going to do a concerted effort at trying to break into Fortress Delve, which is this constellation here. Now, whether that is a throw everything at it and hope to see whether it works, or whether it's simply a case of saying, okay, we will do whatever we can within reason, and then in 4 weeks' time, if we haven't made any progress, then we can officially say, look, we said we'll spend 4 weeks on this, but at 4 weeks, we're going to give up. We're going to walk away from this. So who knows? It's all up in the air. The thing to be aware of is the first week is based around move-ups. I say move-ups in quotes because industry has been going nuts in T5Z and 1DQ, as well as some other systems in the Fortress Delve constellation of O-EIMK. Basically, everyone is building ships as quickly as they can, and production is going absolutely nuts in order to prepare for this big offensive. Now, the other thing that was announced is potentially that the word Tengu was thrown around a fair bit. It looks like there's going to be a Tengu doctrine. Obviously, if you remember from the changes we've had recently with Hunter's Boon, that we no longer have the penalty to skill points when you lose a T3 cruiser. So therefore, pilots are much more willing to fly them now. And so a Tengu doctrine is going to be tested. And whether this is the thing that makes all the difference, we will have to wait and see. And rest assured, I will report on that. Also, if you remember last week, there were a load of shield timers that were set off. There was a couple in Null. There was then like Satios and other structures in T5Z that were reinforced and put into armor timer. I said that last week that if they're not contested, then it's harassment. If they are contested, then it's aggression. It turned out it was harassment. The armor timers were not contested by the Imperium, and the week is basically in Delve has basically been skirmishes, but nothing sort of strategic happening in terms of structures getting killed or anything like that, or getting into armor timer and fighting over the armor timers. So it looks like I'm going to have to start up my weekly battle reports again. That if you remember, I covered the losses in all of these systems. So T5Z being the staging system of PAPI, and they used to bridge into ETAC V. Whether they still do that or whether they go straight into 1DQ or use the Tengus in Covert Ops config to drop into the back systems here and try and push from the other direction. We will have to wait and see. Right, so there you go. So that brings us up to date in terms of all the conflicts. Then I'm going to quickly cover the Grand Heist. I meant to do this last week and I kind of ran out of time because I knew I wouldn't have enough time to edit. So I just wanted to bring you up to speed. This is now live on Tranquility, or should have been live because we're now releasing on Tuesday. So I just wanted to cover that there's 8 keys covering 4 quadrants. These were the original regions on Singularity. I want to bring it to your attention. These regions changed for the Northwest and the Northeast. And you can now see that Vale of the Silent and Calavella have now moved into the Northwest keys. They were in the Northeast. And obviously all the non-NPC nullsec areas have been removed, as well as Job specs. So wanted to bring that to your attention. The thing to be aware of is that obviously these keys, once activated, so you basically fly into the reserve bank like you usually do, to the ESS as you usually do. You now have a link for the reserve bank. You use your key to unlock it. You either use a 15-minute key or a 45-minute key. These then work in minute increments. It ramps up until it reaches its maximum payout, which is halfway through, which is about 150 million at the halfway point, and then drops towards 100 million towards the end. If you're on your own, that means you'll make 1.2 billion approximately if you manage to stay the full 15 minutes, and over 3 billion if you manage to stay the full 45 minutes. It is shared across multiple players. Be aware that once the key has unlocked the ESS, anybody can come in. They don't have to be in the same fleet. They don't have to be in the same alliance. Anybody can come in, link to the ESS, and start draining it. And that is then shared. The payout, minute per minute payout, is then shared across all the players. Also, even if the key holder disconnects, the ESS stays open for the duration of its 15 or 45 minute timer, depending on the keys. And then also we have a nice user interface now, which is really clear with this nice little circle around the side, which kind of ticks down with a minute timer rotating around as well. And hopefully they'll bring that. CCP, please do that to Entosis as well. It would make Entosis a lot easier and a lot more interesting to look at. All right, then finally, we have our July status update, which was announced. I could talk for hours about this. I'm not. I'm going to literally come down to this. Scarcity is coming to an end in Q4 2021, so the end of this year. And as you can see here, these are the main highlights. Increased quantity of all resources across New Eden. Moongru will be able to be compressed at last, which will make raw core mining of moons much easier. Balanced paths for all mining ships. We're going to get specialized holes for gas and ice. And there's a rework of the industry index. On top of that, there's also changes to capitals, in the sense that it looks like they're going to bring in anomalies for capital ships so that you will be able to have more capital ships out there for the hunters. There's going to be module balances for the structures, and apparently more is going to get done to Pochven as well. All right, so there you go. So just a quick little mention of that. I'm sure other channels will cover that in great detail. You can have a read through this at your leisure. I will link it in the description. And that's about it. So yeah, I've got my super chat thing there if you want to help the channel. Please like, subscribe, hit the bell icon for notifications. Do mention me in your Corp Discord, Alliance Discords. Thank you very much for all the views we're getting. The channel is growing all the time. By the way, we're really close to 5,000 subs now. So please sub, help us get to 5,000. It's a big landmark for us. And yeah, as always, thank you for watching. We're now a Tuesday release. Hope you enjoyed this kind of extended format. It was a little bit longer than usual, but I had a lot to cover. But thought, thankfully, I have a little bit more time for editing now. All right, thank you for watching. Until the next one. Bye.